Welcome to the Great Recaps. In Roman mythology, although Hercules was seen as the champion of the weak and a great protector, his personal problems started at birth. Juno sent two witches to prevent the birth, but they were tricked by one of Alcmene's servants and sent to another room. Juno then sent serpents to kill him in his cradle, but Hercules strangled them both. In one version of the myth, Alcmene abandoned her baby in the woods in order to protect him from Juno's wrath, but he was found by the goddess Minerva, who brought him to Juno, claiming he was an orphan child left in the woods who needed nourishment. Juno suckled Hercules at her own breast until the infant bit her nipple, at which point she pushed him away, spilling her milk across the night sky and so forming the Milky Way. She then gave the infant back to Minerva and told her to take care of the baby herself. In feeding the child from her own breast, the goddess inadvertently imbued him with further strength and power. The Road of Hercules is a route across southern Gaul that is associated with the path Hercules took during his 10th labor of retrieving the cattle of Geryon from the Red Isles. 13. Hannibal took the same path on his march towards Italy and encouraged the belief that he was the second Hercules. 13. Primary sources often make comparisons between Hercules and Hannibal. 13. Hannibal further tried to invoke parallels between himself and Hercules by starting his march on Italy by visiting the shrine of Hercules at Gades. While crossing the Alps, he performed labors in a heroic manner. A famous example was noted by Livy, when Hannibal fractured the side of a cliff that was blocking his march. In ancient Roman society, women were usually limited to two types of cults: those that addressed feminine matters such as childbirth, and cults that required virginal chastity. 14. However, there is evidence suggesting there were female worshippers of Apollo, Mars, Jupiter, and Hercules. 14. Some scholars believe that women were completely prohibited from many of Hercules' cults. Others believe it was only the hour Maxima at which they were not allowed to worship. 14. Macrobius in his first book of Saturnalia paraphrases from Varro, "For when Hercules was bringing the cattle of Geryon through Italy, a woman replied to the thirsty hero that she could not give him water because it was the day of the goddess women and it was unlawful for a man to taste what had been prepared for her. Hercules, therefore, when he was about to offer a sacrifice, forbid the presence of women and ordered Potitius and Pinarius, who were in charge of his rites, not to allow any women from taking part." 14. Macrobius states that women were restricted in their participation in Hercules' cults, but to what extent remains ambiguous. He mentions that women were not allowed to participate in sacrum, which is general term used to describe anything that was believed to have belonged to the gods. This could include anything from a precious item to a temple. Due to the general nature of a sacrum, we cannot judge the extent of the prohibition from Macrobius alone. 14. There are also ancient writings on this topic from Aulus Gellius when speaking on how Romans swore oaths. He mentioned that Roman women do not swear on Hercules, nor do Roman men swear on Castor. 14. He went on to say that women refrain from sacrificing to Hercules. 14. Propertius in his poem 4.9 also mentions similar information as Macrobius. This is evidence that he was also using Varro as a source. 14. Worship in myth. There is evidence of Hercules' worship in myth in the Latin epic poem, the Aeneid. In the 8th book of the poem, Aeneas finally reaches the future site of Rome, where he meets Evander and the Arcadians making sacrifices to Hercules on the banks of the Tiber River. 15. They share a feast, and Evander tells the story of how Hercules defeated the monster Cascus, and describes him as a triumphant hero. 15. Translated from the Latin text of Virgil, Evander stated, "Time brought to us in our time of need the aid and arrival of a god, for there came that mightiest avenger, the victor Hercules, proud with the slaughter and the spoils of threefold Geryon, and he drove the mighty bulls here, and the cattle filled both valley and riverside. 15. Hercules was also mentioned in the fables of Gaius Julius Hyginus. For example, in his fable about Philoctetes he tells the story of how Philoctetes built a funeral pyre for Hercules so his body could be consumed and raised to immortality. According to Livy, Romans were commemorating military victories by building statues to Hercules as early as 305 BCE. Also, philosopher Pliny the Elder dates Hercules' worship back to the time of Evander, by accrediting him with erecting a statue in the Forum Boreum of Hercules. Scholars agree that there would have been 5A7 temples in Augustan Rome. 17. There are believed to be related Republican triumphadors, however, not necessarily triumphal dedications. There are two temples located in the Campus Martius. One, being the Temple of Hercules Musarum, dedicated between 187 and 179 BCE by M. Fulvius Nobilia. 17. And the other being the Temple of Hercules Custos, likely renovated by Sulla in the 80s. In Roman works of art and in Renaissance and post-Renaissance art, Hercules can be identified by his attributes, the lion skin and the gnarled club, his favorite weapon. In mosaic he is shown tanned bronze, a virile aspect. 18. In the 20th century, the Farnese Hercules has inspired artists such as Jeff Koons, Matthew Derbyshire and Robert Mapplethorpe to reinterpret Hercules for new audiences. 19. The choice of deliberately white materials by Koons and Derbyshire has been interpreted as perpetuation of colorism in how the classical world is viewed. 19. Mapplethorpe's work with black model Derek Cross can be seen as a reaction to neoclassical colorism, resisting the portrayal of Hercules as white.